Virtual production is changing the way we produce content, from film to immersive media to high-quality television. Virtual production is a game-changing development.
At StoryFutures Academy, we partner with industry to deliver a complimentary raft of virtual production, training and research. We work with productions, we offer training labs, we conduct research, and we've created a unique production accelerator with Future Screens Northern Ireland called VP Futures.
We created VP Futures because it wasn't just about upskilling the workforce. It was also about building capacity in UK companies and enabling them to undertake new R&D.
All of these skills are in very, very high demand. We are running out of people who can do it.
The StoryFutures Academy Virtual Production Skills Report identified a huge gap in the UK's ability to capitalise on VP. Companies tell us they just don't have enough access to the skills, the expertise or the technology needed to grow.
I've been following StoryFutures for quite a while now, and I've been taking a lot of their courses and workshops. My goal was to learn about Unreal Engine and gaming technology, and so this has been a really useful lab. It's been very inspirational.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our launch for the StoryFutures Virtual Production Skills Report 2023, which is absolutely hot off the press. This arrived this morning and will be available to everyone at the end of the webinar. So we've got a lot to get through today, so forgive us if we're a bit swift. We've got a panel discussion coming up, but first what I'd like to do is introduce Dr. Claude Heath, who's one of the report's co-authors, who's going to just take us through, with the aid of a few slides, some of the key findings from the 2023 report.
Hi Peter, thanks for the introduction. I'm going to do a quick introduction to the report itself and what's inside it, what you'll find there. We can't show you everything in this talk now, but just to give you a sense of what the contents are and how we got them. Let me just share my screen. Here we go. And let me just start with a brief introduction to the report. This is by the authors from James Bennett, Claude Heath, Fiona Kilkelly and Professor Richard Peterson. It was created during 2022-23, and it's based on these three pillars that you're looking at here. On the left, you've got the survey, which we carried out online. We've got 35 organizations that all across all different types, from micro to large enterprises. And in the middle, we've got 41 interviews with practitioners. They're qualitative, semi-structured, and we analyze these, and some of that analysis in the report, and it is there to work against and with the quantitative data, which came from the survey. And then finally, on the last pillar is the VP Futures, which you heard a bit about there in the sizzle reel, which was where 8 companies came together to do live R&D and development and then production with a funded process supported by expert mentors. A very interesting and challenging experiment. So what we're actually talking about, we're actually talking about this transition which we're all currently going through at the moment, which is from traditional linear processes of filmmaking into something that's non-linear, where the demarcations that have been set up over historically, if you like, have been subject to some change. And what we are looking at doing now is to find ways to deal with this transition into a non-linear way of working. Everything's been rolled up. These different previously segmented pieces of work are now rolled up together. That forces a different type of collaboration to happen. And of course, great benefits can come from that, which we will come to later. So let me just summarize with 5 key areas. They overlap. They're not necessarily exclusive, but they're 5 key findings that will be a guide to what the report is able to tell you. And the first of these is that the demand for training and continues to outstrip supply. Not just training, but the skills themselves and everything that's around the skills and the new roles that are being created. What we have heard very much from interviews and from the survey is something like this picture. where you can see now that it's very much loaded at the top there, where people have described the need for growth to be supported in very strong terms. It's a very strong barrier, the absence of skills, or a very strong barrier versus a very strong barrier. We've got 3 different kinds of company that we've surveyed, ranging from VP productive to VP ready to VP in waiting. That covers the spectrum, if you like, of the different types of company, as well as the sizes of them. So we've done an analysis based on that. And you'll see here that people surveyed, or companies surveyed, have given us this picture of where the skills are that are hardest to find, and also the roles. And the top 5 here are VP supervisor, stage operator, stage technician, because the 2 terms are used to collect together, technical artists, technical directors, and producers with experience of VP. So those are the key areas where hard skills are hardest to find for those companies. Second finding is that 1/3 of organizations have less than 6 months experience with virtual production. And this is quite a lot to digest, this fact, but actually in some areas that are key, you will be finding that the people with less than 6 months of experience are working on live projects. The third finding is that 2/3 of organizations will be working in VP find the skills in very weak or weak supply. This is something that is backed up again by the data. And if you look across 3 different types of companies, from VP productive to VP in waiting, you can see how it's loaded down there into weak supply or very weak supply. So there's a picture emerging which is of a great lack in certain areas, which the report delves into in a bit more detail. The key finding number 4 is that trial and error R&D in VP is happening across all projects, and 79% are actually of projects according to our survey. But we are aware that the VP R&D is happening in different ways, and different types of R&D is happening on most projects at different times. But if you look at the second bullet, the second point here, that those organizations who have received funding, it was be around the 10K mark, so or less than, which actually makes it very difficult to sustain an intensive R&D environment, which is what you need to develop the capacity to work in VP, and of course to build the teams that can allow you to do that in different ways. So let's come to the final finding, number 5, which is the areas where support is most needed for R&D. Now this covers these areas: coding and engineering, workflow integration and plug-in design, and art department games engine skills, and film games culture integration. Now that is an interesting one, because of course it's not a technical area, it's about communication, and that's one of the main contributions of the report, is to look a bit more into what makes good communication on a VP set or in a VP project, and to identify the kind of skills you actually need to make this happen. Let me take you to the next slide, which is basically an illustration of the skills areas that need prioritization if kind of seamless R&D is going to happen. And as you can see, it backs up the coding and engineering, workflow integration, top of the pile here, plug-in design, a specific area, but other areas would be including management and design development. So these are what you might call the logistical skills and communicational skills. Planning is a very important part of VP, and that's been highlighted during VP Futures as well. The importance of providing basically a package that will allow you to tackle the harder technical as well as the communicational and logistical sort of challenges to conduct VP. But what we've done is try to sort of create a skills map. So you will have seen a version of this in the interim report from last year, 2021, that was released. We've updated it. We've put in the new information from the surveys and from the interviews. And now what you'll see, there's some highlighted areas that are based on the skills gaps areas that I've been talking about. It's a recursive space. It's non-linear, it's cyclical, as you can see. Ben, who's on the call, might recognize that in the middle there is the Unreal or Epic diagram of the VP workflow, which I've been slightly photoshopped it to work in a way with this map. But what you have is the cycle in the center, the departments, the roles, and then the skills as it fans out. So what you're looking at really is a way of dividing the skills into two camps. Creative and logistical are in blue at the moment. They are non-data handling, so they are, if you like, they're not the skills that are producing maybe the final product, but have gone into the pipeline, into the workflows that allow it to happen. And that covers communicational as well as the highly creative skills as well. But then the yellow, on the other hand, is a mix, or is part of the mix, which is very much the data handling, and will be working hand in hand with the blue skills, if you like, the creative and logistical skills. And the interesting thing about this version of the mandala is now that the all skills areas, all roles have clearly got a mix of blue and yellow, if you like. So we're now looking at a fuller picture than we had in 2021. I've highlighted the skills gaps areas there. So for example, at 2 o'clock, you'll see art department game engine skills is the top rated area. And that is something that you can find more about in the report. We've got highlighted areas on the roles that are hard to fill. And we've got some more detail as you go in. You'll see that the kind of conversations that we want to happen when VP is going well will be across departments and across these previously traditional demarcations have now broken down. And you'll find that the kind of communications and conversations, creative-wise and technical-wise, are happening laterally in a crisscross fashion. Just to illustrate that is a nice quote from Monica, who this isn't in the report, but it shows you, for example, how the departments that might not necessarily be talking to each other might be talking to each other more and will be talking to each other much earlier on, hence the front loading of VP. Just to illustrate how positive it can be, there's a great quote in the report you'll find from David Levy from ARRI, who mentions that an instance where Danny Boyle is shooting a feature film and he's looking through the monitor, he's giggling because he's happy, he likes what he's seeing, but he wants something else, he realizes, and the team are able to just iterate an idea very, very quickly, and within a few minutes, they're shooting it. It's an example of how adaptive VP can be in the right hands and in when you have a creative balance that's working. So finally, really just to present those skills areas, the roles and the skills gaps for R&D. These you'll find more about in the report. And you'll see that there's a smattering of blue to yellow. It's roughly six blue to 9 yellow. So it's quite interestingly, it's not just about the technical skills. We then created a matrix for VP Futures, taking the same skills map and giving people a chance to map their own skills areas in readiness for working on VP. And the aftermath of that was then to come away and say, we've been able to transfer, in this case here, you'll find in the case study that the transferable skills have been taken from your previous experience and mapped successfully onto VP. And you'll find a lot more, you'll find these 8 case studies in the report. So finally, I just wanted to say, this is our general picture, a broad picture of what we think the recipe is for creating successful VP, or VP that allows R&D to happen in the right way, and that allows that kind of creative conversation that Danny Boyle was able to benefit from to happen. Thank you. I'll hand you back to Peter, and I'll just stop sharing.
Thanks, Claude. That's brilliant, really insightful there. And obviously, everyone, that is just a very quick fly through, but thanks for being so precise in that for us, Claude. Just to say also that the report, watch your inboxes. As soon as we're finished, B will press send and you'll receive a copy of the report, and you'll be able to look at it in far more detail than we could obviously offer in this instance. But thank you very much, Claude, for that. And maybe you can join us later on in the Q&A if there's any specific questions for you.
Thank you.
So next, I'm very, very pleased that we've got a very illustrious panel to welcome now. First of all, Fiona Kilkelly, who's an immersive consultant. You've seen her in the film right at the head of the piece there. She's also been acting as executive producer for the VP Futures scheme. So welcome, Fiona. Also have Sue Lister, who's executive in charge of ILM London studio, basically in charge of everything, I think I can easily say there, Sue. And Ben Lumsden, who's in charge of business development. He's the business development manager for Epic Games based out of London. And lastly, Andrea Miller, who is founding director of Sunnyside Productions and was also one of the beneficiaries of the VP Futures scheme, which we'll cover a little bit later on. So there's the chat feature, which you've all seen. Please just fire in your questions there. We'll make certain that there's enough time at the end of the panel to be able to cover off some of those questions. Obviously, we won't be able to cover every single one of them, but we'll do our best to get through them. So firstly, Sue, if I can start with you, this is the second skills and R&D report that you've actually contributed to, and you did some great work for the launch of the previous report. I wonder what if you could just share what your analysis is of the current situation we find ourselves in around the skills situation in the UK at the moment.
I think it's improving, Peter, and reading the sort of advanced report that you kindly sent through, I think that you can see that there's some Mars Academy, for the Mars group, for example. They're doing some great work in not only upskilling practitioners, but actually sort of educating clients as well. What comes out for me from Claude's report always is that actually everybody needs to get into needs to be educated in how to deliver this, but actually how best to use it. And I can see all of that improving. I think that for me, it's the convergence of skills that remains the problem area. And I see that, we're thankfully fully crewed at the moment, but even within our own staff, I can see that those that sort of convergence of skills is the problem area, and the area that we are trying to lean into. You're taking people from a games or a visual effects background and putting them on set, or we have with our clients people who are used to a traditional production paradigm, and they are now dealing with issues that they didn't really used to deal with until post-production. And I think we're almost looking for those sort of triple threats, those unicorns who have it all. And it's those kind of core skills, soft skills that for me remain to be the sort of glaring challenge. The other thing that I picked up on in the report, particularly I noticed it actually from the case studies from the story, the VP Futures thing that we helped mentor, was actually the key outcomes for nearly all of them were developing the management and business development skill set. And actually that's something that I think we're feeling as well. It's actually realizing that producers and managers have to really become educators. It's not just a sales job, it's actually an education piece. Let's talk about how you can use this technology, how it can serve you best, and when not to use it actually as well. And that really chimed with me with some of the experience we're having.
Great, thank you for that. I mean, I'm just follow that up a little bit. I mean, you said that things are calming down a little bit. Have you got any, where are the unicorns at the moment? Have we herded them into the right place, or are you still searching for those sort of particular sets of skills? I know you've talked about the creative skills versus the technical skills and combining those. Is this improving at the moment?
I think again, it comes out in the report. I think it's at that senior level where we are traditionally a visual effects studio, so we have senior creatives. Generally, they're also very senior technically as well, but often they're not used to being in a set environment, and sometimes even very senior people find that very daunting. So I think it's finding those senior people that we are still finding challenging. And I suppose the tactic that we're taking is trying to fill some of the gaps with in-house training. Nobody's ever perfect. We can all improve. But I think, that nothing from the report made me go, oh no, we're not experiencing that at all. We still are, definitely.
That's great, thanks. And specifically, you said that senior people. What can you just elaborate on that? What do you mean by senior?
I'd say VP supervisors and production, actually, producers, executive producers. Again, we have really strong production management teams but they understand visual effects, so getting them to understand the paradigm, a production paradigm. It's not a world they usually live in. Interestingly, again, I read in the report, somebody said actually first ADs would make great virtual production people or supervisors. Funnily enough, we've done a little bit of that ourselves, and in some ways that's an easier way to do the education, is say, okay, you can do that bit, let's teach you about how it plugs in more to the visual effects side of things.
Brilliant. I just wanted to hold that thought, because I just want to move on to the R&D piece, which I think is of equal importance to the skills, and I guess to you, Fiona, really. So we know that we've seen in the report there's some what we call quite worrying barriers to research and development in this, and what we've sort of categorized as a sort of very risky approach, which is like a trial and error, where companies are having to work on set and solve those problems whilst they're actually working on set, which is a huge risk to the company themselves. How can we improve on the industry's offer for around R&D? What do you think is needed here?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I think that's one of the most interesting findings from the report. 79% of companies working on live VP projects, all of which essentially encompass elements of live R&D on the fly. So this tells us that companies are seeing the opportunity of VP and finding ways to build this into new projects or conducting R&D on the sidelines of existing ones. Now, whilst that gives companies opportunities to figure out what new skills are needed across their teams and how to integrate VP into their existing pipelines and workflows and so on, for many smaller but R&D intensive companies, that's just unsustainable, and it isn't practical, and it doesn't lead to the building of a sustainable R&D roadmap within their businesses so that they can build capacity in VP. But why is that likely to be the case? I think one of the reasons is that there isn't any strategic R&D innovation grant funding for virtual production currently in place and available to businesses so that they can underpin their work and undertake R&D. And not having access to that and not being able to work on and only having to work on an ad hoc trial and error approach to R&D means that this is a real risk, and it's a risk in terms of the delay to the faster uptake and deployment of this technology within the sector wholesale.
Right, I knew you'd say that. Just digging a little bit deeper into that whole piece of work there. Can you give us an example of where R&D is being embedded? I mean, I know we've got VP Futures, which has sort of sought to sort of really get R&D going within companies. Is there any good examples you can pick out where that's achieved the goal and you've seen improvements?
I think a really good example in terms of where we've seen when you give companies an opportunity to conduct live R&D on set is we looked at VP Futures, and there's some case studies of VP Futures within in the report. That's the virtual production accelerator we ran with Future Screens, NI, and Paul Moore and Declan Keeney. And the majority of the teams that came out of that program came out not only with a huge amount of additional capacity built within their teams around skills and knowledge of VP production workflows, etc., but they actually came out with projects that were really ripe and ready for next stage innovation grant funding. And it reminds me of the creative industries generally. We've been here before with VFX and in immersive tech back in 2015 and 2020. And this challenge was met by the creation of a UKRI R&D innovation fund that addressed specifically challenges in production pipelines and processes, such as the Audience of the Future immersive production one about 3 years ago. I think it's time to now do that for virtual production, and it would really help enable companies to conduct R&D in a much more impactful and viable and sustainable way.
Great, and that I guess very neatly brings Ben into the picture here. So Epic do a ton of work in this space, don't they? You're very, very active in upskilling. Can you just sort of give us a sort of your overview at the moment of how you approach the sort of gaps in what Epic are doing to try and support companies with a training need, and also a little bit about R&D, because I know you're very R&D heavy as a company, aren't you? It's a very important aspect of what Epic do.
Sure, yeah, thank you. Well, I suppose with the larger companies, we have, direct relationship with, like with Sue's team and others, where we can really directly support teams who are using Unreal Engine on large scale virtual productions, and then all the way through to indie creators. I suppose if people are not aware of our mega grants program, that would be useful to go and look up, because we've got $100 million fund, which is specifically geared to people who are creating interesting stories and technology in this area. We've done, we're as transparent as we can possibly be with training and curriculum. We've actually developed a whole bunch of virtual production curriculum that we put out last year in order to help people train schools and training schemes, and we're seeing some fantastic partners. Sue mentioned the Mars Academy, and of course with StoryFutures and VP Futures, we've had a great collaboration there. But there's Final Pixel, Escape Studios, Screen Skills, Moses, on-set facilities. There's a whole ecosystem of people doing great work in that sort of training and R&D aspect. And I'd say for those who are coming into the ecosystem and are not yet talking with us, please do get in touch, because we want to help and enable everyone in this space.
Yeah, I know you're incredibly generous with the company's money and time, moreover, and have offered advice across the spectrum there. And you picked out a few of the schemes that are around at the moment. I mean, one of the findings of the report is that there's a need for more people to be upskilled, especially those that are also on the job currently. What sort of are you able to prioritize that towards the film TV industry, or are you broadening out again more towards games? What are your priorities around research and training at the moment?
Well, our priorities are simply to get as many people using this technology and using these skills as possible. And I think that's really across the board, trying to bring different people from different disciplines in. We're trying to make the tools as user friendly as possible. So in the latest release 5.1, we did a huge refactor of the stage operation tools. So it's a lot more user-friendly with a big redesign of the UX and a new iPad app so that people can do color correction volumes, for instance, and things like that on the stage. So making that whole user experience a lot easier. And always for us, it's pushing that product further. So again, in 5.1, we've brought Lumen, which is our global illumination system, into being able to use on the wall, so that you don't have to pre-bake all of your lighting. You can move the sun around or the light around a lot easier. So that sort of magic of virtual production is a lot more possible. And for sort of non-LED virtual productions, I'd like, it's worth calling out the virtual camera, because we've had a massive refactor on that, and again making it much more familiar to filmmakers. So the interface is much more familiar to sort of a lens tap, if you like, and it's much more customizable and again user friendly. So that's really the push for us, is to try and bring more people into the ecosystem and make it more achievable, because when we started this, especially the LED wall part of virtual production on the Mandalorian, and it was a bit of a science experiment, and we've sort of productized it over the last few years, and over the last 18 months or so, I'd say it's been in a really good place. But it's with each release, it's sort of quality of life things and ease of use at the moment. That's the priority for us.
Thanks. I mean, that's you picked out a lot of the new features, and it's time to bring Andrea in, because I know you were nodding there, and I know you've benefited from a lot of the expertise from both ILM and Epic and around the StoryFutures offer as well. But you're a producer and a director. You've had a long and illustrious and long may it continue career in this fabulous industry. Just you've got a couple of VP projects on your slate at the moment. How hard for you has it been to find the right people to make these wonderful projects happen?
In terms of the crew and technical staff, I suppose the challenge with VP is not only are you looking for someone with very specialized skills, but you're looking for them all at the same time. They're not on a linear production line the way we would be normally, like Claude was already showing us. It's a circular production process, and so everyone's together at the same time, and because everyone's so absolutely critical to the process. In particular, I would say art department, for me, it was a revelation how important practical art department were. And just to sort of echo what Sue was saying about the people who connect across from traditional filmmaking into this kind of filmmaking are people like the DOP, because he's lighting for the virtual camera just as much as he's lighting for the practical set. The first ADs are critical. The thing that I did with StoryFutures, I had the most amazing first AD who would be brilliant in this situation going forward. And so it's a challenge when there aren't a lot of people who do it. Having them all at the right time is incredibly difficult. And I was very lucky with the last thing I did. My crew were extraordinary, and that exciting feeling when you're in the studio and everyone's kind of contributing to something all at the same time, and you can just see the whole thing getting better. It's a real thrill to work in this way.
And I think you're most probably one of the senior people that Sue was alluding to right at the beginning there. Just for your own journey, let's say, from a very traditional background in arts, film and TV, just talk us through that learning curve that you've been on at the moment. We don't have enough time, Peter, for me to talk you through the learning curve. It was really, really kind of vertical in a lot of in many cases. But very exciting. And the thing about VP, when it's the right thing for your story, and I would say it's absolutely, again, echoing what Sue was saying, it doesn't suit everything. But if you want to shoot in a location that you cannot get to, or you can't afford to get to, or that doesn't exist, which is what was the case in my project, it is really, really ideal. It's a really ideal way to start to think about filming. So when it serves your story, it's an incredibly kind of powerful thing to do. So I'm going to drop you back on set on that first day at Epic with the wall, as a sort of, forgive me for this phrase, a more traditional background as a producer, what did you see as I'm interested what the immediate issues you could see when you saw that world on the stage there at Epic?
Well, I mean, to an extent that I trained as a studio director and multi-camera director in the beginning, that was a huge benefit for me because I feel completely at home in a studio. And so what I would have been like had I been trying to learn this without that background, I've no idea. The main thing is the technical things. It's the optimization, it's the frame rates, it's the fact that we were shooting in 5, not 5.1 and not 4.27. So we couldn't use Lumen in the same way. We had a lot of, there's a lot of kind of, there are a lot of technical things underneath the bonnet that we were always trying to do workarounds around. And I assume actually that this technology will always have, as all technology always has workarounds, and clever people come up with clever ways to hack the system in a way that makes it all work for you. I mean, that's part of, to an extent, it's part of the fun of all of you all doing it together. Everyone gets a little bit of a buzz out of that. The main technical things, I guess, that optimization, I guess, is the main thing. I used to say, I should just have a T-shirt that says, if we do this, if I want this to happen, how long will that take, and is that even possible? And because you don't have the same sense as a director or producer of what your kind of time horizons are if you ask for something in particular. And so you're really very reliant on the VP supervisor, and particularly the stage operators who are really, really key to say that's going to take ages and be really hard, or actually there's a quick way to do this, or you're really kind of looking for all of that help from them in terms of being able to gauge, if I had these ants on a hand, and if I wanted them to animate, that was a complete nightmare. So everyone was just like, just don't go there at the moment. And that's fine as long as producers, as long as you have that kind of back and forth with your team where they can help you, help set expectations when you're working, and ideally come up with a yes, but we could do X, Y, Z. So it's really, I suppose that was the main thing that I was always asking.
So you've got your T-shirt on there, Sue. I know that the ILM and both Epic and ILM put a lot of time and effort into supporting VP Futures. I would imagine, I would imagine that Andrea is one of those people that you've been able to win round to our evil world of virtual production. Is this the sort of effect you're hoping to achieve with the work that you've been doing over the last couple of years in this space?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, everything that Andrea is saying feels like she's had that experience of understanding where it can be best used, perhaps understanding when not to use it. And I think that is always an important part of the conversation. It isn't the solution to everything. And sometimes, and sometimes purely because that it might be, look, we really could do that more easily and better in post, and why don't we leave it for that? But yeah, it absolutely, and I think one of the things about the VP Futures experience is actually certainly all of the staff at ILM who got involved, they got an enormous amount out of it, of sharing, as Ben was saying, just sort of winning everybody around to how this technology, how powerful it can be, and how to use it, how not to use it, how to problem solve with it. And I think that actually, it came out a little bit in the report, just people solving some problems on other people's projects that maybe we hadn't faced on our own. We're still in the early days of this this paradigm way of working. So every project is presenting unique problems, be the project or the problem big or small, really.
Yeah, every day is a school day, and I know that Andrew's team creatively push both Epic and ILM. Are you finding that let's get back to the creative side of this, because that is the reason we're doing this, is to make these great stories come alive. Are you finding you're getting a challenge from producers and directors, Sue, for better, more creative, more inveigling worlds and things? Are you seeing people saying we need more from VP at the moment?
I think it's very much evolving. I think that what we're seeing more and more of is people wanting sort of bespoke LED configurations, less appetite for the big standing wall, and more, I want to do this, can you shape it like this, can it have a ceiling, can it have a floor, can there be water? Every project brings new challenges, and much more, we call them rather anachronistically pop-ups, but what there's because they really don't just pop up, I'm afraid, but maybe that's the next one, maybe one of those like those tents that you get from Decathlon. But I think that people, I think in a way, it feels to me that is a really positive sign, that people are starting to say, clients are starting to say, okay, well, can I do this? Can I do that? So it's becoming much more bespoke in the requests, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and that is a pattern that we're seeing. And also in the report, we do acknowledge the fact that people have changed the business model a little bit, which to me seems more of a tweak than a massive step change, in that there's more demand. Is there? Or
it's not that things aren't continuing to move forward. It's not a pause. It's just a change, I think, in the business model. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of what we were getting back from the research. So Ben, I want to stick with the creative side of this for a minute, if I may. The mix of skills that you need on a production team, we've got those sort of incredibly important games design skills, but we need to integrate those into a working environment that is both creative and technically adept. So what can the industry itself do to ensure that we have these right people that have got those ultra creative skills, but also able to technically achieve what directors and producers are demanding at the moment? I'm thinking across the sector here, not maybe just film, but also the broadcast, what I know you're now calling ICVP, in-camera virtual production, and XR and performance.
I'd say the sort of most successful projects and most successful teams that I've seen across virtual production are those teams where they have that cross-disciplinary mix. And when you're bringing traditional games people into a visual effects company, or on-set people like Sue was talking about into a visual effects company, vice versa, bringing visual effects experts into on-set companies or into gaming companies, that whole sort of melting pot, when you're seeing that cross-disciplinary mixing, I mean, I think Claude called it out earlier, and it's right there in the report about communication being everything. But I think I've seen some really incredible examples of some high-profile projects that aren't quite out yet that have had fantastic cross-disciplinary teams within them. So I'd say that's the main thing. I'd say that everyone, anyone who's watching this webinar or later, who's not yet tried, should have a go. And I say that, with the greatest respect. I just think that everyone has something to bring to this whole world of virtual production. And, the barrier to entry is so low now. If you have a gaming laptop and an iPad, then essentially you've got what better than what Spielberg had on Tintin 20 years ago, better than Cameron had on the first Avatar. You've got that whole virtual camera system in a box. And so I'd encourage people who are creatives essentially to have a go and try and make something. And that goes to, individuals, but also to small businesses who are interested in this space, who haven't yet ventured into it, because, a lot of people are nervous that they might be too technically complex, etc. But it's I think the expertise that people can bring to virtual production is really impressive, and you know, having those different skills. A cinematographer is always going to do the best virtual cinematography. You know, so it's sort of teaching a cinematographer that little bit of the technical aspect of using a 3D package is, you know, it's a challenge, but it's a much easier thing to do than to teach someone who's an expert at the 3D package to become, you know, a 30-year master of how light moves on a person's skin and hair, for instance.
It's great that you bring that back to the creative piece, because we're really tight for time. We've got quite a few questions coming in,
Sure.
but I just want to end with Sue. You've talked a lot about the challenge of the creative work being the most important thing, that you can train people to use the technology, but the creative skills are important. And I know when we launched the first report, this was one of your main messages, I think. So I guess, is that breaking through? Is that message reaching everyone out there?
I think that, you know, when I spoke about it last time, and I can't remember why we got onto that when we did the panel last time, Peter, but I think, you know, I was sort of commenting on the, you know, relentless focus from perhaps our policymakers on STEM subjects, and, you know, maths to 18 years of age, anybody, and maybe the lack of support for arts subjects. And, you know, do I think that's changed? Not necessarily. In my world, and you know, and Ben has just said it very eloquently, they are of equal importance. You know, visual effects has always been where creativity and technology meet. We will take people from both ends of the spectrum and make them work together, and that's where, you know, to coin a phrase, the magic happens. I think we will always see people hungry to tell their stories, make pictures, and virtual production is again that marriage of technology and the creative. So I think it breaks through, in as much as that's still what people want to do. It's just you know, do I see a change in policy? No, I don't, sadly.
That's a bit of a downer for us, but thanks anyway. I kind of figured you might say that, and we've got, thank you everyone for that very kind of passionate debate. Fiona, I'm sorry, I know we haven't come to you very often, but there's a couple of questions I know already brewing for you. If our panelists would just stay on there, I'll just thank you for the time being, and we're going to open up the mic to the first question, which is, someone remind me who it is. Mia Martel. If you'd like to ask your question, Mia, thank you.
Yes, I was just wondering, what would be the best practical steps to move from physical production into virtual production as a producer or exec producer?
Who fancies having it? Go on, Fiona.
I think what would be useful, Mia, is within the report, there's a skills mandala, and just to actually understand what's required within those roles. It's there as a training and a personal training and learning development tool to actually look out where you fit within that VP kind of production pipeline. And I know from working with people in a similar situation, actually going through that process was really useful to look at the areas in which you would need to kind of learn, upskill, and I think have a better understanding of the very, very different and unique pipeline that's evolved in creating, funding and producing within virtual production. So use that. And I mean, I think there's lots of really good 1 day, half day, 2 day programs by lots of UK training providers, some of which are funded and supported. There's nothing like being on set to give you the experience of understanding where you can fit into that whole process.
Andrea, maybe you wanted to just come in there as well.
I absolutely did, because I think I would echo what Ben said and say, just get your hands dirty. There's a ton of free assets out there.
just to have a go. Like Fiona was saying, there's lots of half day or online. That's how I first sort of started to test out this idea. Would this work for my idea? I just did some of the online courses first of all, and then thought, yeah, actually this would really, really work. And so I would just say, get your hands dirty. It's really, really much more possible to do than the Mandela would make you think. The Mandela's a little bit intimidating, I think. But it's much, much more possible to do because the assets, a lot of the technology and assets are free to use.
Great, thanks. Mia, does that get your hands dirty, I guess, is what we're saying. And we very, look out for all those training programs that we've discussed already.
Thank you.
Anonymous. What will be, in fact, it's just disappeared. Oh, there it is. It's about AI, and it is, it's in the answered section, right? What do you think are the challenges facing around AI at the moment? That's a thorny old question at the moment. I'm gonna let Ben have the first go at that one, I think. How's AI going to impact us in terms of virtual production?
There'll be, I mean, it's going to be vast, of course. I think the impact of AI is going to be massive across multiple industries. We're seeing, we've been overwhelmingly surprised by the pace of AI over the last year in particular. It really has exploded. So in terms of how it'll come into the engine, we've got bits and pieces that we're looking at, but nothing concrete as of yet. So that's a bit of an open question at the moment. But I would say already across productions, we're seeing a lot of people who are using, for instance, some of the AI image creation and story creation tools. And I think that's going to accelerate and probably contribute to an explosion of creativity. If you look over the last however many years, let's say decade, when we've got, it's becoming a golden age of content, really, and user generated content, as well as lower budget content, as well as higher end. And I think certainly in the mid tier and down all the way to bedroom creators, I think we're going to just see an increase in tools that are going to make it a lot easier for those sorts of creators.
Thanks, Ben. I'm going to whip through as many questions as we can. John Dower out there, do you want to put your mic on and give us your question direct?
Hello, Peter. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, I just this is in relation to your slide, which is the demand for training continues to outstrip supply. I'm just wondering where motion captured animation fits into VP, because seems to me like it segues quite well into the use in LED walls with crowds and things like that. And then also you talked about the games and film culture transition, but it's hard to find training for directors, producers and animators to transition into mocap. I'm just wondering, is the creative, technical and production use of mocap part of the VP skill shortage?
I'd say yes, it is. But Sue, would you want to have a response to John?
John, I would say that we definitely consider motion capture to be part of our sort of VP tool set. It's all using the same kind of camera technology in many ways. As to the training around it, I know that there are some not for directors and producers necessarily, but I know that there are now appearing some university courses that are actually sort of teaching it to animators and actually specifically training in that area. But it's interesting what you point out about actually so much of virtual production chat focuses on LED walls, and I think actually it does mention it in the report, but actually virtual production is one of these catch-all words that's really about the use of real-time technologies, I think. But yeah, I think there is probably a gap for training practitioners or directors in how to use that kind of technology. Yeah, it's a good point.
Thanks, Sue. Great. And just quickly, Andrea, I know that you've sort of had some experience in that respect as well. I'm going to bring in Ryan. Do you want to come on and ask your question? Ryan McKenna.
No, it's working. Sorry, I was wondering. Sorry, I'm actually at another conference. So I was wondering if people already have experience in VP, how do we make ourselves known to the industry?
You got experience in VP. How do you make yourself known to the industry?
Sure.
It's got to be Sue, really, hasn't it? And then Andrea, I think. You then, Andrea.
I
How do people make
suppose
themselves known to the industry?
how to make yourself known to the industry. I mean, I suppose from my perspective, we are, you know, we're all if we're advertising those roles, then then please apply. I think at the moment, you know, anybody who has some element of experience in this area is of interest to us. And of course, even if we're not specifically recruiting for something, we're always interested in speculative applications. Yeah, that from the ILM perspective, that would be my answer. Great, thanks. And now I've got to say, inevitably we've run out of time, and so we can't get to all these questions. There are some really great ones on there as well. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Emma. But we'll try and get back to you with some answers. But all I need to do now is thank our panel, who've been fabulous and given us some really, I hope, very good insights there. Sue Lister from ILM in London, Ben Lumsden, Business Development Manager at Epic Games, Fiona Kilkelly, Executive Producer and Immersive Consultant, and of course, Andrea Miller, who is Producer and Director for Sunnyside, and also to Claude for giving us a really good, concise overview of what the report entails. So thanks everyone for devoting your lunchtime to us today. Thanks to StoryFutures for funding this whole thing. Thanks ILM and Epic for all your massive support over the last few years, getting VP Futures out the door. To our other partners, including Future Screens Northern Ireland, who've been fabulously supportive of the whole programme, and we managed to get 4 projects from Northern Ireland through on VP Futures as well. To everyone for all your time and energy. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Peter.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye.